have thrown in the towel. I would have given up had I not believed that there was something better waiting for me. Now, I must say this to us, that David had the upper hand on most of us. What do you mean, preacher? David had been anointed by God. And David knew that whatever God promises you, that God will bring it to pass. But watch this. Although David knew that God had anointed him to be the next king of Israel in 1 Samuel chapter 16, around verse number 7. He had anointed him to be the next king of Israel. Although David knew all of that stuff, David still had to do something. You know how we are. I truly believe, I say this all the time for those who come and say, the Lord has called me to this, that, or the other. I say the first call then is to preparation. In other words, if you're anxious to get behind this desk, because all time when folk come, they see Minister Bray stand, Pastor Bray stand here, they see one of the other associate ministers standing here, and they think that this is easy. No, well, that's an easy job. I can stand up for 20 minutes and say something to the people. But ministry and pastoring goes much deeper than that. And David could have just sat on his hands sitting there and did absolutely nothing, because David knew that although he was not in this chair now, he was just one chair away. And then David knew that he had been anointed to be king of Israel. And if David was like most church folk, David could have sat idly by and just waited his turn. But watch this. But God wouldn't allow that to happen. Because the Bible says that when God anointed David to be king, and how did I say this to church folk? And the Bible says, not Buckner, the Bible says that an evil spirit, I'm going to figure that part out, mess up church folk. And the evil spirit came and rested upon Saul. And the evil spirit caused Saul to begin to chase 22 times. 22 times. Now, here is the man reigning on the throne. What would make you so mad with me? You have the position that you will come chasing after me because you heard that I am going to get the position. Why not serve your time out? That's right. And then when your time is done, move aside so I can assume the position. Not Saul. Not Saul. I hadn't intended to go this way, but not Saul. Saul decided that I'm going to kill my competition. How about that? That's tough. No, don't kill your competition. You might have to fight him, but don't kill him. Saul says, I'm going to kill my competition. And that brings us to this 13th verse of this 27th division of Psalm. When David begins to pen, I would have given up. But David goes on to say, but I believe that on this side, in the land of the living, I was going to get what God promised to me. Somebody say faith words. Tell somebody say try it. So David said, I think I'm going to try this faith thing. It's right there. He says, I had faith unless I believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And so I said my first point was that you got to be patient. It's right in verse 14. He says, wait on the Lord. Now ask your neighbor, who are you waiting on? Who are you waiting on? See, I tried to say to them earlier this morning that sometimes we find ourselves waiting on people. But when you start directing your prayer to God and start trying to get things from people, here's what you'll find. You'll find yourself in a position where you are waiting on the Lord. See, this is why David could continue to believe that God was going to show him goodness in the land of the living, because David was patient. He was waiting on the Lord. Now, I said be patient. And I need to tell someone this. Patience does not come without a test. You want Bible? James chapter 1, verse number 2.
Yes, Lord.
Count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations.
When.
Verse 2, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience.
Yes, Lord.
Say to neighbor,
Neighbor,
patience come
patience comes
when your faith is tried.
when your faith is tried.
Ask your neighbor, do you have enough faith
Do you have enough faith
to pass the test?
To pass the test. Ooh, Jesus.
So he says you got to be
That's deep.
patient. David says, wait on the Lord. I'm almost done. Number one, you got to be patient. Number two, you got to be progressive. Well, in other words, if progressive means I got to be moving.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why I didn't say wait. I said be patient. I don't know how God expects us to do this, but I do know that the Bible says it this way. Hebrews chapter 12, verse number 2. He says, looking unto God, the author and the finisher of your faith, that you might be able to run this race, he says, with patience. That's what the Bible says, that you might be able to run the race with patience. So it lets me know that just because I'm being patient does not necessarily mean that I'm standing still. It simply means that I'm moving, but I'm moving at a pace at which is comfortable for me. Now, I have to be careful how I say at the church folk. When I say comfortable, I don't mean that I'm not doing something that's strenuous, but I mean that the pace that God has given me is comfortable and I can get it done. Does not mean that the task is not difficult. Does not mean that the task is not hard, but because I'm moving at God's speed, here's what I find going on. It's not so much Marcellous carrying the load, but it's God carrying the load. And so when that happens, it happens because I do not get ahead of him. I can't get behind him. I got to be yoked up. Matthew 11:29. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. My burdens are light. My yoke is easy. See, when we yoke up with him, then he puts us in a position where we can be progressive. He said, where do you get that from? It's right there in the text. He says, you got to be of good courage. We got to be of good courage. No matter what the enemy brings your way, don't cower, don't tuck your tail and start running, but stand your ground until God says move. You stand right there and do what it is that God has told you to do. Sometimes God will say this, stand still. You shall not need to fight in this battle. Sometimes he'll tell you to stand still, and sometimes he'll tell you, you got to step in to the Jordan, Joshua. If it's going to open up, you got to step in. You got to step in. And see, God is funny because God does not tell us to do things when it's the easiest to get it done. When they stepped into the Jordan, the Bible tells me that the Jordan was at flood stage. Lord, let the tide recede. Then let me step in. See, you have to be progressive. You have to be progressive. You can't just sit idly by and do nothing. What would have happened to Bobo? What would have happened to Bobo Valentine if Dr. Carson had just sat idly by and listened to his counterpart? Needless to say, she would have been dead. That's what would have happened. So he was progressive. I don't know if that surgery had ever been performed because he literally